But we just jump right in. Tough weekend if you are a head coach of a team whose colors are maroon and white because you are employed today. The news started yesterday that Jimbo Fisher is out at Texas A&M. That was following a pretty significant win for A&M on Saturday night. And then the news this morning about 7:50, it became official, or at least it leaked, and then shortly thereafter it became official with the release from Mississippi State that Zach Arnett had been relieved of his duties as head football coach at Mississippi State after a total of 11 games, if you include the bowl game from last season, 10 games into this 2023 campaign. And so Mississippi State is now officially in the market for a new head football coach. The Bulldogs, it has been a tough year. Any way you slice it, it has not been a good season for Mississippi State. They have one win in conference play. It was on the road against Arkansas on October 21st. They have 4 wins overall against 6 losses with 2 games remaining in the regular season. Southern Miss this Saturday at 11 a.m., and then the Egg Bowl on Thanksgiving night at 6:30. I'm Richard Cross, Brian Haydad, Michael Borky. We're glad to be with you. Haydad, you have said for a couple of weeks that this was the inevitable conclusion that was on its way. It became official this morning. I just kind of open it up to you and let you start wherever you want to.
I was going to get a haircut today. No time for that.
Oh, you don't need one. You need a
haircut.
Well, thank you, first off, Michael. Got a tip early this morning that there was some smoke in the air. I reached out to friend of the program, Ross Dellinger, who kind of ironically, but I predicted the entire sequence of events on yesterday's podcast. I said a national reporter like Ross Dellinger will be the first to report it, and then we'll all confirm it. And then you get the email, and then you get the text from the university that has the logo on it and says change of leadership. All of those things happened, including Ross Dellinger being first to have it. And so, like you said, Richard, I've thought this was kind of the inevitable conclusion for quite some time. And honestly, I started having questions about it, you guys, in week 2 when they played so poorly and escaped that game against Arizona. And then the next week you see them against LSU and they can't do anything against the LSU defense that we now know is not good, and yet State couldn't do anything. State's been bad on both sides of the ball all year. Recruiting has not been something you could point to and say, well, the future looks bright. And at the end of the day, with Zach Arnett, I've been saying it for the past few weeks, he looks miserable on the sidelines. Looks like he would rather be almost anywhere else than coaching football at Mississippi State. And so, today when we talked to Zach Selman, he talked about, keeping a constant eye on the football program and feeling that a change was needed, a shot of juice, which is a word we've used a lot here on this show. Mississippi State was lacking it, and he felt like they needed to do something, that he couldn't allow it to go any further, and so he relieved Zach Arnett of his duties this morning. And so now, we begin another coaching search here in Starkville. That'll be, since I've joined this show, let's see, we've had a basketball, a women's basketball, and this will be my 3rd football. So excited!
Wow! Thanks for the content, I suppose. Glad you could bring that. When you look at the way the season unfolded, you mentioned the Arizona game that Mississippi State won, and that has turned out to be the best win on the schedule by a large amount. It's an Arizona team that's now 7-3 on the year under second-year head coach Jedd Fisch. There was the game against LSU. There was the road trip to South Carolina where Mississippi State's offense, where did that come from? Big night for the offense, but still a loss. The Alabama loss, the Western Michigan win, the win at Arkansas for the SEC win, then the loss to Auburn, the loss to Kentucky, the loss to Texas A&M. The reason I mention all of those things, I'm curious if you think there was a tipping point, right? When we see a situation that results in an outcome, that's one of the questions. What was the tipping point? What was the motion that pushed it over the edge? Did that exist, or is this all just cumulative?
I think there were two tipping points, if we're being totally honest. I think
Okay.
the Auburn game was the one where it became very, very evident that he was not going to survive the season. That after they went over to Auburn, a team that had not been able to do anything offensively the entire season, and you gave up all those passing yards to them, that was when it was, okay, this isn't going to work, and you need to start thinking about the end of the year. The second tipping point was Saturday, when you go over to not a good Texas A&M team, playing their third-string quarterback, and you lose 51-10. At that point, it became, you can't continue like this. So for the first time that I can remember, Mississippi State has an interim head coach in the regular season. We were talking about that in the press conference today. Ole Miss has gone to the Egg Bowl with an interim twice in my lifetime. Both of those were as a result of coaches being fired in the middle of the year. The middle of the actual calendar year with Hugh Freeze and Billy Brewer. So Joe Lee Dunn was an interim, and Matt Luke was an interim when he came to Starkville in 2017.
And then Houston Nutt had already been fired, but finished the season.
But he coached the Egg Bowl. The Egg Bowl. So they didn't have an interim in place. State, to my knowledge, in my lifetime for sure, has never had an interim head coach at the Egg Bowl. So that'll be a first for Mississippi State. They bring Greg Knox in, who's been Mississippi State's interim before. He was the interim for the Gator Bowl after Dan Mullen left. He was the interim at Florida after Dan Mullen left there. So he's now with Orgeron out, he is the top interim head coach available. 2-1 lifetime head as a record.
Does that matter? Does it matter who they named the interim head coach?
No, and I'll be totally honest. I thought Knox was kind of the third guy I thought they would go to. I mean, I know he's done it before. I thought they might go with Tony Hughes because he's been a head coach before. He was at Jackson State, and he's such a veteran. And then I thought for a second they might try the Cadillac Williams play and go to Bumpus. Even though he's never done it and he's super young, I thought he might give a real shot of excitement. But Knox is a guy who's been there and done that. He's very well respected within the walls of the football department. Fans like him. It's a good State. If they were going to do this, they had some good options there to go to.
Oh, so many directions to go. Let's start immediate. We got time for coaching candidates and who makes the most sense and how much money is Mississippi State going to pay and all of those things. What's the immediate 2 games left in the regular season? Is your gut that you get an inspired Mississippi State team that plays like crazy for the last couple of games against Southern Miss and against Ole Miss, or do they just kind of hang it up?
That's a really good question, and I feel like I will know the answer after the first series on Saturday. If they come out and they look sharp, they look crisp, I'll be willing to say, yeah, they might, they'll have some juice here. But if they come out and it just looks like it's been looking, then, yeah, it could be a really ugly last couple games. I do think Will Rogers is going to make an attempt to play this week. That'll be a big boost to this offense. But, these guys, think about their last 12 months. Their head coach died, and then the guy they hired to replace him has been fired now. This is their third head coach in 11 months. So I almost can't blame them if they don't put forth a massive effort in these last 2 games and they just want to get through the end of the season.
Words from Zach Selman today. He spoke at the normal press conference time, and then Greg Knox spoke after him and took some questions. Zach Selman says, as part of my thorough and continued evaluation, I have determined that a change in leadership is necessary to move our football program forward and position it for the highest level of success. I have the utmost respect for Zach Arnett and am incredibly appreciative for the effort he put forth in leading our football program. However, the progress and on-field results have not been the standard required for Mississippi State to achieve the level of success. There's more there, but it's all that you would expect it to be in an announcement from the athletics director. Sports Talk Mississippi. So much to get to. Just getting started with you. We'll take a quick timeout. We're back right after this in the Pearl River change. There's some amount of post-mortem that it feels like you need to do. How did we get here? What went wrong? Whose fault is it? I asked you the question a second ago. What was the tipping point? And that's all well and good, but it kind of feels like we have documented all of that in real time as this season has unfolded. And I think for most Mississippi State fans, it's not about, well, what happened and what went wrong. Everybody knows what was going wrong. Losing, recruiting falling off a cliff, it appeared, just based on where the rankings are right now and when we're, a month from National Signing Day, give or take. A head coach that didn't feel like was making great in-game decisions. Like all of the stuff is there, and it's not, you don't really have to spend a ton of time rehashing it. And so what all Bulldog fans want to know is, who's next? And sometimes it feels like it's a little unsavory to start doing that while you've got a sitting head coach. And so in a lot of ways, we've talked around that for the last few weeks. And that's kind of been our standing policy on this show. The fact is, in this profession, you're going to have coaches that are in battle. And immediately people want to know, who could you get if you made a change? Or now that you've made a change, who are you going to get? I think that's kind of already where Mississippi State fans' heads are. Is that reasonable? Hey, Dad, when you think about you, your friends, group messages you're on, media people you're talking to, hasn't everybody already turned their attention to who's next?
Yeah, 100%. I guess I'd say yesterday when I was thinking about what we were going to talk about on this show today, I was going to talk about how, with Arnett finishing out the season, that, this was going to be, from an egg poll standpoint, the most apathetic I could ever remember it for State fans. That they were just going to go in, get beat up, and then walk out of there and go, okay, let's reset from there. And now, and I'm not saying that the addition of, or that Arnett leaving and Greg Knox, that doesn't change my egg bowl prediction. But at least now, you can start being excited ahead of time, I guess, because it was going to be a really painful 10 days. Well, I mean, I was talking about it on the podcast yesterday. It's like the thought of going to campus today and sitting there and sitting through Zach Arnett's press conference. I was just thinking, like, why am I here? He's not going to say anything worth anything.
Yeah.
And so thankfully Zach Selman relieved me of that burden today. But yeah, for weeks it's been who's going to be the next head coach. And even though we couldn't talk about it on this show, I did talk about it on the podcast and talked about it online. And yeah, I mean, now you can go full bore into looking ahead to who's going to be the next head coach at Mississippi State and what they need to bring to the table to get that program back in the right direction.
It is an interesting time as a fan, right? I mean, State fans have been down for weeks now. I mean, it hasn't been an exciting or compelling product, at least from a fan like morale and like mental health perspective. I mean, the list have been thrown out there, right? You've got all the way up to Virginia and the coach at Liberty and coach at even a Texas State or a Troy, or you can look at these lists and then on Saturday pull their games up and see what Liberty's all about. There are a lot of Mississippi State fans that I would guess have never seen a Jamie Chadwell offense before. You're going to be excited watching Liberty conduct offense if you get the chance to see them over the next couple of weeks and he remains a candidate to whatever degree for your job. And so for the next couple of weeks, State fans get to enjoy football season, I think. You're going to have these lists of teams, and you're going to go look at Tulane possibly and see if they can make another incredible run for a second consecutive year and watch them play and watch their style of play and kind of get excited about football again.
So if you ask Zach Selman, and he said today, the next time you hear from me is going to be when I announce a new head coach. That's like a line that's straight out of Greg Burns' book. Like, don't believe anything you hear. The next time you hear from me, it will be to introduce the next head football coach, and that's fine. But if you weren't asking, if you were simply asking Zach Selman about process and about what he's looking for, he would give you a list of qualities that he's looking for in a new head coach. Proven winner, cares about his student athletes, good recruiter, experience, blah, 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 whatever the list is. We know all those things, and like there's a manual for athletics directors somewhere. And when asked what qualities they are looking for in the next head football coach that they hire, there's a paragraph in there that they can just pull from the AD manual and read that, and it's the same for everybody.
Right.
We don't have a manual.
Yeah.
We don't want a manual.
There's coach speak. There's AD speak.
Yeah. So here's where I'm going with this. Thinking about fit for Mississippi State. On one front, it's an SEC football job. It's going to pay a lot of money with a great stadium and great facilities and a passionate fan base. But I think we can all agree that Mississippi State is, in some ways, a unique job within the SEC and within college football. Define unique however it is that you would like. So when you think about fit for the next head coach, and, proven, winning, all of those things needs to be part of it, who are the names that come to mind? Because, again, as Borky said just a second ago, you got hot boards out there, you got lists. I mean, Ross Dellinger, Mississippi State parting ways with Zach Selman, here are the names to watch. Websites have already got their hot boards out. There's no insight into those other than, hey, these are just guys that are winning football games that might make sense. But if we take a little bit smarter approach to that, beyond just, okay, these are the same names that everybody else is throwing out, who strikes you as a fit for Mississippi State?
Honestly, for me, I'm of the opinion right now that Mississippi State needs to look for someone that is on the surface not a fit. And kind of the same way they did with the athletic director. So for so many years, State has promoted from within and found guys like that. And then they went and found a guy who had no connection to Mississippi State whatsoever, a young guy who brought his own ideas. I think State needs to go kind of similar in that aspect. I think, Mississippi State has not been known for outstanding offense for the last few years. Even with Mike Leach, that was not an exciting offense by any stretch of the imagination. That's what they need. They need something that helps sell tickets. I know winning sells tickets, but you got to be an entertaining football team as well. So that's something I would be looking for. I'd like a younger guy. It would be something I would look for. Somebody, and it doesn't have to be too young, but at the same time, somebody who this could be maybe their first big job. They've been a head coach, but this could be their first big job. But I tend to agree with Zach Selman. That's twice today I've done that. Where once was on Twitter and I was trying to say Selman makes a plea to Mississippi. So I was saying Selman makes a plea to Mississippi State fans to please come to the USM game, basically. But I said Arnett, and my mentions were like, "Wow, what a class guy!" It's like it wasn't Arnett. But I think that what Selman said today was winning traits, right? Go get a winner. Go get somebody who, wherever they've been winning. Like I was big on Tom Herman a few weeks ago, but I feel like the way that that Florida Atlantic, their season has gone, that shine has come off a little bit because he's not winning, and it's tough to sell a fan base. Hey, this is your new head coach. He went 5-7 at FAU last year.
Hold on a second. That's a short-sighted view.
It is short-sighted, but
you either believe Tom Herman's a good football coach or you don't believe Tom Herman's a good football coach.
I do believe he's a good football coach, but at the same time, I understand that.
And from whom he inherited it.
I know. You got to put an asterisk next to anything that Willie Taggart touches. Like a guy that has the reverse Midas touch. But at the same time, it's tough to sell your fans on, hey, this is our new coach. Oh, by the way, he got fired at Texas. And even though we all know he didn't get fired at Texas for wins and losses, that's how it's going to be spun. So I don't know. I have an idea of how I would do it. I have like my own top 5 in my head. I guess we'll talk about that when we come back, of how I would attack this if I was Zach Selman. But I will say this, my first phone call, I'm going to go really big, and I'm going to see if I can connect. And if I can't, I've got great options behind that. But I would like to go – I would start with somebody – I would start with some Power 5 guys and just say, what do we got to do?
Got a State fan in one of my group messages, and he said something, Hayden, that you pointed to. He said, I swear if the new coach is sold to me because he's blue-collar, I'm going to lose my mind. is what he said today.
Yeah, you don't need that. You don't want that right now.
Unless that blue-collar coach is also a proven winner.
Right.
His point was they've done that with every sport lately. And he's like, Mississippi State can be more than blue-collar. It can be something else also.
It's true. That's to be a part of the conversation. And many of you have already on the C Spire text line, 601-879-4395. 601-879-4395. We will get to your messages as we are able. A lot coming out. But said we'd play with some names for the next head coach at Mississippi State, why they might make sense, whether or not they are attainable, what Mississippi State's budget is. Certainly that's not a question that we actually know the answer to, but it's something that we will be talking about as this pertains. What's Mississippi State's NIL situation? Because that's a factor in what head coach is available to you as well. Lance Leipold. Chris Kleiman. The two Kansas coaches have their last names mispronounced on the regular. We get the scope. Is he Leupold? Is he Leopold? Is he Leopold? Is he Leopold? Lance Leipold. And then it's Chris Kleiman. Not Kleeman, not Clemon, whatever other. All right, so.
Kleiman.
So, I just throwing that out there.
I'm still going to get it
names.
wrong. Huh? I'm still going to get it wrong. It's fine. I'm so bought into Leopold at this point that it's just going to come out, and I'm going to get it wrong.
Have you been a Leopold guy?
Yes, I've been a Leopold guy. I even heard it. Gus Johnson even said it. I mean, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, well.
I believed him.
Yeah. All right. Let's go around the bend. Go around the circle. Kind of like we do with winners and losers.
Yeah.
Hey, Dad, give me a name. Tell me why it's good.
Well, you just mentioned one of them, and it's not the one you think I'm going to say, but Chris Kleiman is a winner. And when you listen to Zach Selman's, I'll get it eventually. Zach Selman's talk today, he talked about winning traits and winning when you see it. Well, this guy outside of Saban, who's done more winning than Chris Kleiman? He makes $5.5 million a year at Kansas State. My thought process is State needs to. I mean, right now I understand why they paid Arnett $3 million a year, right? Totally unproven. And the way they set up the contract, if it was like a parachute, if it went bad, they could eject. Well, then you see Kiffin making $9 million a year at Ole Miss, and there's just whether you like it or not, there's a sense that Mississippi State's cheap. So don't go cheap. Call a coach like Chris Kleiman and say, "Would you come to Mississippi State for $8 million a year?" Throw it out there. Throw a big number out there to start, and see what he says. So somebody like him, Leipold would probably command a similar kind of salary. I don't know that Jonathan Smith would command that kind of salary because you have a little leverage with him in that his conference is going away, and if he wants to play in big games, he doesn't have a lot of choice but to eject. But that is his alma mater, so at the same time, you never know there. So, but Kleiman would be my first phone call, and I would say, what's it going to take to get you out of Kansas State?
He said one candidate. Hey, Dad, one at a time. Know the rules, man.
I mean, just rapid fire.
I'll do what
as
I
fast
want.
As he could go.
In May, by the way,
Jonathan Smith, for what it's worth, making $5.1 million a year.
Kleiman's contract, he got an extension in May out to 2030. So it's an 8-year contract. The buyout there might be pretty steep. Now, that shouldn't stop you from giving it a shot, because of course you should. However, that I assume will be a hurdle.
Yeah.
Give me a name, Borky.
He said it, Jonathan Smith. And, I know he's got no ties to this region. And that is a thing that people care about. But especially in this era, I think it matters less and less. He's a winner at a place that is so difficult to win at. And despite it being his alma mater, which might be a significant hurdle, his program doesn't have a conference right now. And none of their options are good. The Big 12's not going to save them. The Big 10's not going to save them. The SEC's not going to save them. I mean, are they going to merge with the Mountain West? That's possible. Are they going to merge with the AAC? That's possible also. Luring a guy away from his home is probably difficult, but man, his home is changing pretty quickly, and he has taken a dead program and given it incredible life. See what he would take.
Okay. I may be persuaded a bit because of the conference that I've spent the most time covering in person this year, beyond what we talk about, obviously, on a daily basis. I think I would start with Jeff Traylor. I don't know if Jeff Traylor is doable or not. He's making $3 million a year right now at UTSA. He is comfortable in that job. He's comfortable in San Antonio. He's a Texas lifer. He is a legend in East Texas football. He won 3 state championships and coached in 2 more in 15 seasons at Gilman High School in East Texas. But he's won everywhere. He left high school coaching to be an assistant coach for just a handful of years, and then he got the UTSA job. And they won back-to-back Conference USA championships on the way out the door of that league, and they have a chance, a very legitimate chance, to win a regular season conference championship and play in the American Conference title game right out of the gate. Somebody said Traylor is going to Texas A&M if he wants it. Traylor is going to Texas A&M if they want him. Let's turn that around. I know for a fact that Jeff Traylor has turned down at least 2 head coaching jobs since he has been at UTSA. One of them in the Big Ten, one of them in the Big 12, both of them what you would classify as middle-of-the-road jobs in that league. So, I don't know what that means. Don't know what that means, what his interest level would be in coming to the SEC, but I know he's a good football coach. And I know this might be the time that Jeff Traylor would really consider leaving UTSA because he is losing, this is his 4th year, he's losing his starting quarterback from the last 4 years. Frank Harris is in his 7th season at UTSA. He's been on campus there since 2017. And he has 38 records. And so you got to start over with the quarterback spot. They don't have the NIL money that a lot of other schools do. You're talking about playing in the American Conference. And so that might be worth somebody looking at. Might be. Now let me ask the question that's floating around on everywhere. What about Dan Mullen 2.0?
I don't think it'll happen. I think that for 2 reasons. One, I feel like there might still be some lingering resentment from his departure in 2017. And I also think there will be some nervousness that this was a coach whose recruiting was never his strong suit. And now not only do you have to recruit high school players, but you have to recruit your team every year. And I don't know that that's where they want to put Dan Mullen. So I would be surprised if Mullen ends up being what we would consider a finalist for this job.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people say, like national guys, well, he's won there before, he could do it again. It's like you guys are kind of oversimplifying the era in which he was winning at Mississippi State versus the era that the new coach will have to coach in now.
And Kirby kind of put him on blast, too, after the cocktail party.
That's not what you want to hear from a SEC coach about the guy that you're bringing in.
No, it's not.
And, I mean, you're adding Texas and Oklahoma as well. I mean, for an already almost impossible conference to exist in, bringing in those 2 brands with their resources.
And by the way, I have a lot of respect for Mark Keenum. I do not know this to be true. I just know that I have heard people say to me, Mark Keenum would never sign off on Dan Mullen. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I have had people say that to me. Hey, Dad, I don't know if that's the resentment that you're alluding to, if that relationship was a little fraught at the end, however you want to describe it. to me, Dan Mullen seems unlikely. I'm not sure that it's the worst hire that Mississippi State could make.
Certainly
but
not.
It seems
Certainly
unlikely.
Not. Yeah, I agree.
Jamie Chadwell, Coastal Carolina, until this year, he's now at Liberty and has led Liberty to a 10-0 record. Runs a unique offense.
Probably, if you strike out on the big choice, that's probably 1A. That's probably the top group of 5 guy that you should be looking at.
And his style is one that you talked about earlier. Now, he's a religious guy, which is great. I don't say that as a negative. He's a religious guy. He's a good salesman. When you hear him talk, you're like, "Ooh, I like this guy. I like his energy." But the style of play is what you're talking about. It's different.
Mm-hmm. Up tempo, yeah. That's what State needs to be looking at.
It's a fun offense to watch.
All right, you have sent us a bunch of names to discuss on the C Spire text line. Let's do a little bit of that when we come back. We're inspired. Let's just whip through as many names as we can get through that you have sent in the last half hour or so, kind of going in reverse order here. Jeff in Pontotoc says DJ Durkin will be available. He's strong on defense, and he smiles a lot. Okay.
Hey, Dad and I are having, and we're going to keep having sessions during the commercial break about some of the names that have been thrown onto this text line and the reaction.
Some of y'all, man. Come on.
Keith Invaden says it would be nice if Dennis Allen took the State job so the Saints could look for a better coach. I know that's crazy thinking, but hey.
I don't want to wish that on my Mississippi State fan
about rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. Good Lord.
Deion Sanders has been brought up by multiple people.
Don't think that would happen.
He's not going to coach in Mississippi again. That applies to Ole Miss too. He's not coaching Mississippi again.
Buddy Stevens, East Mississippi Community College. He has 5 national championships.
Next.
Jimbo Fisher would be a great head coach for Mississippi State. He has, after all, won a national championship.
The headline would be incredible. Mississippi State hires national championship winning coach.
Bob Stoops to get a foundation for a couple of years if he wants it. Or Brian Johnson, the quarterback's coach with the Philadelphia Eagles, who was a former assistant at Mississippi State.
Brian Johnson will be an NFL head coach as early as this offseason. He's not coming back to college.
Yes. Yeah, he's not coming back to college.
All right, here's
and Bob Stoops isn't coming back to Mississippi State.
Perhaps a name that would actually generate some conversation. Gus Malzahn, UCF, former Auburn head coach. In case you
feel like he would be down
him.
Yeah, I feel like he would be down the list. Like he's a guy you might talk to, but at the same time, I feel like he is going to end up at Arkansas. I'll be amazed if he's not the head coach at Arkansas next year.
An Arkansas job that does not currently have an opening, but everybody in the state of Arkansas expects theirs to be one soon. Brandon in Boonville.
We're not Sports Talk Arkansas. We can make those people mad.
Shane Beamer. Where did that name even come from? From where did
Shane Beamer?
I understand that was the name that was on a list that was produced by a website that covers Mississippi State. What moron thought that was a name to headline your list with?
This guy is going to be 4-8 at South Carolina this year. Imagine that press conference. Imagine trying to sell people on that.
And by the way, Shane Beamer is, by all accounts, one of the greatest human beings you will ever come across. What an idiot, Shane Beamer.
And on top of the woeful underachievement at South Carolina and breaking his foot in anger after a loss and all that stuff, he would be wildly expensive. Have you looked at his contract and his salary and his buyout? I mean, on top of him being a disaster at South Carolina, to this point, on the field anyway, he's recruiting
Cody
well.
Tupelo says, 1, Jonathan Smith, 2, Tom Herman, 3, Rhett Langley. I think he means Rhett Lashley, who's currently the head coach of SMU. He says Jeff Traylor is not leaving UTSA except for an A&M type job. Generally speaking, I agree with you, Cody, except for some of the reasons that I outlined earlier that might perhaps make him think a little bit differently in this offseason coaching cycle than a year ago. Here's a name.
Lashley's interesting because obviously he's doing a good job there, but, Mississippi State's a better job than SMU. Mississippi State's a better job than Liberty. Those two places are unique, though, compared to your other power or group of five coaches. One, SMU's making the jump to the ACC, so they are becoming a Power 5 program, but they raised $100 million in a day. They've got money there, a lot of money, like a shocking amount of money. It might not be as easy to poach the SMU coaches as you think when they're moving up a level and they are committed financially to football in ways that would shock you at this point with that move. It has been...
Yeah. Lashley will be a tough pull. We'll just put it that way. It'll be a very tough pull because they've got money and they've got an easier road to the playoff.
Les Miles. Yeah. No. Not to mention the fact that he's not in great.
Some of y'all are bored.
All right, there's a legitimate name here. What about Mike Elko?
I think that's who A&M ends up with at the end of this, but he would definitely be somebody I would call if I would gauge his interest, no question.
What are the chances Kyle Whittingham wants to move south? I'd run through a brick wall for him.
That would be an A-plus hire, but that's somebody I think is really happy at Utah. He's been there for so long. I don't think Mississippi State's the opportunity that makes him leave.
Why not an in-state junior college coach? Because
why not a high school coach? Why not a peewee coach? What are we doing here?
Yeah.
Why not somebody who works at the gas station?
And that's no disrespect intended, but it's not the same thing. Bubba in Starkville suggests Kurt Cignetti, the head coach at James Madison.
Winning a lot.
Age is the only concern.
More of these names when we come back. 4:05. We were going through names that were popping up that you were sending us on the C Spire text line. I think it's a fun enough way to do this because it's so early. Why not throw a million names at the wall? If we poo-pooed your name, our apologies. It's nothing personal. It's just, that might not be seated in any sort of reality. I'm sure all of these names are wonderful people. But
there's been a couple that aren't.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Chadwell interests me. I'm really intrigued by that.
Did David Cutcliffe or Terry Bowden interest you?
Wonderful people.
No.
I mean,
great people, though.
Yeah.
Love Coach Cut. Love our visits with him at SEC Media Days.
So I guess the drawback to Chadwell is, hasn't had the big job experience yet. Yep. He was at Charleston. He spent a year at Delta State for what it's worth, but he hadn't even been an assistant on a big-time staff. Hadn't been a part of a big program yet in his coaching career. What does that mean? Maybe nothing. I mean, who knows? He might be wildly successful despite that. Kleiman was at North Dakota State when Kansas State hired him. So you can make that jump and it work. That offense is really fun. I mean, we had somebody ask, is he still running the option? To describe that as the option is a little unfair to what they do because they get great quarterback play. Now, guy this year isn't particularly accurate, but they're incredibly balanced. It's like 2,200 yards passing and 2,800 yards rushing or something like that. Remember, it was his offense that Grayson McCall became everybody's favorite quarterback that you've got to get in the portal until they realized, his grades won't translate to literally any other school besides Coastal Carolina, so he's got to stick around. But, I mean, he would have commanded 7 figures in the portal had he been able to get out. That's a Jamie Chadwell guy. It is an option-based offense, but they throw it a lot. There's a lot of movement. It is it's unique for sure, and it's fun and interesting. Liberty's got a ton of money, though, because you're not competing against Liberty if you're Mississippi State, right? If he's the guy you want to go after, you're not competing against Liberty. You're competing against what Jamie Chadwell thinks he could get if he keeps winning at Liberty. So if they give him enough money of a raise and they've got the resources to do it to keep him happy until one of those comes open, that's what you're fighting against. It's not State versus Liberty. It's State versus, do you see Dabo leaving? and Clemson's there or whatever.
You actually brought up one thing that kind of popped in my mind as you were talking about, limited experience, has not been on a big staff as an assistant. And I don't think that is an issue in terms of day-to-day coaching. I think that can become an issue in staff building. And I'm not even talking about the initial staff. It's one thing to put your initial staff together, but inevitably there is turnover in assistant coaches. And I think one guy in particular that you would look at who has had issues because of a lack of contacts is Hugh Freeze. Hugh Freeze has not built staffs the way others have. He has kind of kept his guys and brought them along the way. Not saying that that's wrong. I'm just saying if you have success and you lose assistant coaches, how deep is your network to be able to replace those assistant coaches on an ongoing basis? But, yeah, I think Jamie Chadwell is very intriguing as a name. Willie Fritz's name has popped up a number of times on here. In fact, I had a buddy that texted me, Willie Fritz for head coach with Will Hall as offensive coordinator. Trying to run it back what they had at Tulane a couple of years ago. Does Willie Fritz do anything for you?
Really good coach. The only concern with me is his age. He's just old. He's in his 60s.
63?
Yeah. And my concern with that would be, okay, I don't know what he's making at Tulane off the top of my head.
2.5.
But, okay, 2.5. So let's say State says they'll double it. Give him $5 million a year.
Okay.
At 66, is he saying, I've made $20 million and I'm 66 and maybe it's time to move on and to the next stage of life? And then you're looking at a sixth head coach in less than, in 12 years, something like that. Yeah, I just don't know about that. So I like him a lot. I think he would win here. I think he would be a really good coach. That's my only concern. Same with Cignetti.
Willie Fritz is 63 years old, and he has literally coached at every level of football, other than the high Power 5 level. He has been a high school coach. He has been a junior college coach. He has been a Division I AA/2 coach. He's been at the FBS level and as a group of 5 coach, and he's been at Tulane since 2016 and has done a really good job. 51-46 is the overall record. Took a little while to get it going at Tulane. 4-8, 5-7, and then back-to-back 7-6 seasons. 6-6 in 2020, 2-10 in 2021. Bounced back with a 12-2 season last year, and then they are 9-1 this year. If you follow Tulane's scores over the last 3 weeks, and they are so physically beat up on the offensive side of the ball right now. Pratt's hanging in there. They're down 3 receivers. They're having to replace Tyjae Spears from a year ago. And yet they're still 9-1. They're hanging on by a thread, but they are still 9-1 and headed for a big matchup with UTSA here in a couple of weeks in the final weekend of the regular season.
Remember, too, he was deeply involved in the Georgia Tech search, wanted to coach through the conference championship, and Georgia Tech he didn't want him to, and he ultimately turned that job down. And so, he doesn't appear to be, quote-unquote, desperate to get out. Now, again, Mississippi State greater than Tulane, don't get me wrong, but that was something that happened a year ago, that Georgia Tech was unwilling to wait, and he asked them to wait, and they said no, and he said no.
Barry Odom is doing a really good job at UNLV. They are 8-2 this season. We had somebody send us a message that said Barry Odom with Bobby Petrino as offensive coordinator or Kane Womack from South Alabama. Those are more realistic choices than what some are throwing out there.
No to Barry Odom. I mean, this wasn't impressive at Missouri. He's having a great year at UNLV, but no, that would be a no. And I don't think Kane Womack's done enough to get this job. No.
G.J. Kinney, young coach at
Boy,
Texas State, doing a good job.
I wish his resume was a little longer. Really exciting young guy. That's a guy that if I wanted to roll the dice, he and then the other name is that's the dice roll is Glenn Schumann from Georgia, the defensive coordinator. And then now we're going into no head coaching experience whatsoever, and I don't know if State wants to do that again. but they love him at Georgia. He's a great recruiter. He's kept that defense elite even after Dan Lanning has left. He's interesting, but they're just so young.
And then we get a note that says John Summerall, and I'll bang that drum all day.
Summerall will be a fantastic coach. That would be a really, really good choice. The only issue there is, I think you guys know that Kentucky is kind of his dream spot, and that would be a painful thing to lose your head coach to Kentucky at Mississippi State, to lose to a equal tier SEC program.
I think John Summerall making about $1 million a year at Troy. And has done a really good job. 10-win season a year ago. They're sitting at 8-2 this year. Was an assistant at Ole Miss. I will tell you that the people in and around the Ole Miss program thought a lot of John Summerall. Like, everybody liked him. He was, if you're just curious about the resume, played at Kentucky, GA at Kentucky, worked at San Diego, worked at Tulane, was an assistant at Troy, linebacker coach at Ole Miss, went back to Kentucky where he was a linebackers coach, and then took the head coaching job at Troy. 12-2 in year number 1, including 7-1 with a bowl win. And so far this season, 8-2 and leading the West Division of the
Sun Belt.
USA. Sun Belt, sorry.